finally. Now, what does the committee done, and the National Assembly at large, done in what have they done in trying to ensure that these recommendations by these particular task forces, the report by the Auditor General, what has the committee done to ensure that they are well adhered to? Has the committee been probably going around the country to assess the state of schools across the country, or what has the committee been up to in regards to ensuring the safety of students, especially in boarding schools across the country?
The committee actually has gone around universities. We started with universities. We are coming back to the secondary schools and then primary. Already we've done the university ones, which we went to the whole country, and we checked on the universities, the status of universities, and we found how rotten they are in terms of lack of funds, stalled projects, lack of lecturers, poor infrastructure in many of these universities. The committee is planning to go to secondary schools as well, because we are moving slowly by slowly. So far we've done the universities, and we are coming up with a report on that. Very soon, because we've been on recess, I know that the next assignment we're going to have will be to visit schools, particularly boarding schools where fires have been very rampant, and be able to bring out the status. But more importantly, we want to follow the reports that have been there before. For cases that have had fire dormitory being burnt up by students or by arsons on these projects. So we are actually on our toes. We are checking every minute. But what I have observed is that boarding schools, as I've seen even with the case that we have of Andarasa, is the very fact that the inspectorate have not been doing their work. That is something that is coming up constantly. The inspectorate in the Ministry of Education is not constantly on the ground, because they will complain to you that they have no means of transport, that they have no personnel, that they really are not facilitated to do their work. There are too few on the ground. So even if we want the inspectorate to inspect these schools and to follow safety standards, we need to facilitate these people who are in the inspectorate so that regularly they can do their job. Private schools, I was talking about private schools, that they have given us the impression that they're better run than the state schools. This is because parents pay a lot more. School fees is a bit higher in private schools, and that's why they tend to be better run. But unfortunately, it's coming out that some private schools are poorly run because they're too private. They're out to make money. They're rushing to get money. This get rich quick business. It's a business. It's not really education. So there are some schools that we need to check whether they're giving proper education or they're simply making money. We really don't know. So standards are being reduced in the name of making money, in the name of a private school. And so that's why the inspectorate must be very strict on this matter. We need to allocate more funds for education. Education is an institution that requires much more than any other ministry, in my view.
Before you talk about funding, are you saying there needs to be, stringent measures in terms of, regulations and granting of, probably licenses to set up these private institutions?
Licenses. When a school is to be to start off, when somebody puts up a school, it must be inspected first before it gets a license to run. And the person who does the inspection is the Ministry of Education. Where have they been? How did they license Andarasa if it was built on cardboards, if the dormitories were that bad? How did they get the license to run a school like that? With so many students in the dormitory? 70 is what is required. How come they had 150, is it 150?
164.
And in a dormitory. It was overcrowded.
Okay.
That should have been cut off. That should have been noticed.
In fact, it's
long
more than
before
double the required number.
Yes, that should have been noticed long before the students were admitted in the school.
Okay, fair.
So I think we need to point where weaknesses are and ensure that those areas are properly addressed. Ministry of Education should pull up its socks and do their work. The manager of that school must also learn that what is the law requiring him to do. to start up a school like that. We have not heard of the management of the school talking. They have not responded. We don't know who they are. This is a private school, but who owns it? We don't know the owner. How did he get his license? When was the school licensed? Yeah. How many students does the school need to register in that school? We really need to know the number of students that ought to be in that school, for them to also know how many should be in that dormitory.
Okay.
Yeah, so details are required here. And so in my view, it is the proprietor of the school. Who is he? A private individual, but a private individual must follow the law.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Sosion, details are, looking more sort of scanty in this particular scenario. And that, like Dr. Mbaka has said, up to now, many people even don't know who runs that particular school, who owns that particular school and all that. But even as you respond to that, I wanted to ask you, because Dr. Mbaka earlier on alluded to, parents being allowed access to these particular schools, because in some instances you hear parents saying they wanted to go and check probably how the dormitories are, the state of infrastructure, but they're told, it is not allowed. How do we deal with that in terms of regulations? Because as a parent, I'm not a parent, of course, but as a parent, you want to know where my kid is going to. Where does my daughter or son sleep?
At which law and which regulations limits parents from checking where their children sleep? Because precisely that is the new home of their own children. Correct. And they should have access, they should be able to see. That brings to fore the business interests that have infiltrated education. Both should tell you that education is a new frontier of business by particularly private investors. And we should be cautious of fraudsters who have entered the edu business center in education, particularly putting up private schools that do not meet the minimum standards that are set out by the regulations of the ministry. And you have asked, how do they operate without meeting regulations? These are cartels that bribe their way. When you hear how many students were in that dormitory, so many of them and congested, 150. You multiply the money that comes out of that, and that money is shared across. It's business. And so if we have very many such fraudulent institutions, it's business for people in those particular space of education leadership. And the question of parents checking and inspecting, to me, I would dispute. How the parents do not have the infrastructure capacity to assess and know the minimum set standards. They don't. It is the work of the Quality Assurance and Standards Office at the Ministry of Education. And why is it that 9 years down the line, those of us who wrote the Basic Education Act, because then in 2012 when Mutula Kilonzo was drafting, we thought we should have an independent Education and Quality Assurance and Standards Council that operates on its own and which is funded. But you see, the successive ministers have actually declined to implement that particular clause. They don't understand it. So that then we are dealing with an outcome of lack of implementation of a provision of the law. It is an omission. And as we talk right now, we should not even be talking about who really is the owner of Endarasha. That particular person is a criminal in a legal standards. And he should have been arraigned by the DCI to take responsibility for the death of those children. And the previous successive ministers who failed to implement Clause 64 of the Basic Education Act. If you are a minister and you have not implemented the establishment of this entity, then you have failed in your duties. And to me, today I call on the President this morning. Recall the operations of the Ministry of Education to your desks and ensure that the right things are done, particularly establishment of Quality Assurance and Standards Office, because it's about the safety of our children. Right now we are witnessing school fires in secondary schools. Why are students burning dormitories? It is common knowledge that with the policy that was hurriedly brought up called 100% transition, we are hiding children like Magunias in dormitories and they're not comfortable. That is why they're burning. And you will see banning of schools. And these students are not banning anywhere. They are not banning classrooms. They are not banning laboratories.
In fact,
and these are not electrical faults. Let us not cheat ourselves. They are not electrical faults.
Mr.
These
Susan,
are deliberate actions.
According to the task force that was shared by Claire Omolo, they said students target dormitories because they feel those are the most valuable assets, and they will be hard if they ban dormitories.
No. That was a report of Claire Omolo of many years back. But now we are talking about 2024. Of course, let's not even talk about Endarasha. Let's not talk about General Hassan. We saw last night Yemit is a dormitory, the other day Isiolo Girls, a dormitory, and we've seen others, dormitories. This is an indication that our students are not comfortable with the state of the dormitories where they are staying. And that brings to question the issue of congestion, even in our current secondary schools. And then very lastly, is it not time? Why did we in the first place as a country promoted private boarding education in Kenya, which is business oriented? It is not helping the country. With the rollout of CBC, which is value-based education, and value-based education is co-shared between home and school, is it not time we completely abolish the boarding and limit at a certain age, maybe up to age 13 or 14? Then such learners cannot be boarders, maybe with the exception of ASAL areas and special needs education. It's something that we need to think deeply as a country, because if we are promoting value-based education, let's allow also households to play a role. And by doing that, and by doing so, you are guaranteeing security, and you are giving the household role to play in the upbringing of their children. It's something that we need to think over. But over and above, even as we think about that policy, which may not solve anything, which may not solve much, can we enforce the minimum safety standards? We have the regulation there, but they are not enforced.
Fair enough.
But they are not enforced.
Fair enough.
And somebody must take responsibility, and heads must roll.
Fair
if
enough,
things
Mr.
have to be done, heads must roll.
Fair enough.
Why didn't we implement the clause 64 of the Basic Education Act? Yet it was approved by Parliament. It is a law in place.
Fair enough, Mr. Sosion. You've talked about the abolishing of boarding primary schools in the country. It's a conversation that has elicited mixed reactions in the country. I'm seeing Dr. Mbaka wants to.
And I'm a strong proponent of the boarding, not only of primary, even secondary.
Okay, fair enough.
Even before Mbaka comes, let me give a simple statistic. Let me give a simple statistic. Simple statistic. At post-primary level, over 70% of Kenyan children attend day education. And the only thing we need to do now is to enhance and strengthen the quality of our day schools, and particularly all our public schools.
It's a very controversial issue he has raised to abolish boarding schools. I am a product of a boarding school when I was only 9 years old at Maseno Primary.
We sail on the same boat.
Yes. So we were happy as boarders, little as we were, 9 years old. I was a student in Maseno Primary School, a boarding school at 9 years old. It was a beautiful school. We passed with flying colors. What has happened today? It means that the management of these schools is what has changed. Yeah, in the past, it was excellent. Boarding schools are not bad schools. These are schools that can nurture young people. It socializes us. It socializes a student as young as 9 years old, or 5. 5 is a bit too young, but 9 years and above can go to a boarding school. Now, the status of parents require that their children can go to boarding schools as early as 9 years old, because some parents travel a lot. Some parents are not there for their children. So boarding school acts as a home. It's a home where you have teachers as parents. And a child grows safely, a child grows with good values in a school. So a school is actually a home for many children who are orphans, children who do not have homes, children who have no parents. And so to me, you cannot abolish boarding schools. Boarding schools play a very critical role in the life of those who are parentless.
Okay, fair enough.
So to me, it will be a very sad state of affairs to abolish them. Many of them are well run anyway. It happens that this was an accident. So now we are trying to generalize that boarding schools are bad. No.
Okay, fair enough.
Let's give them a chance.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Mr. Boaz, even as you respond to that, you talked, you know, just give me your submissions in a few. But I wanted to you to respond to that and, you know, add to this, because you talked about quality assurance officers and the recommendations by the Auditor General in 2020. They said, you know, in ensuring schools have functional safety subcommittees and training of school fraternity on safety preparedness. One of the recommendations was you know, to encourage liaison between secondary schools and the county fire offices to enable the training of the school fraternity on fire, you know, safety. You talked about drills, but you know, for a school like Russia, it would say that there were no fire extinguishers in that particular dormitory. So how do you even talk about training when we don't have, you know, these equipments?
A small car would not be allowed on the road without a fire extinguisher. A small car that carries, at some point, it is only one driver, at some point, maximum 3, and all that. How about a school with those numbers?
A dormitory, for that matter.
Yes, that is where I'll start. But for me, because there are lots of things. I said initially, lots of interconnectedness in all these things we are discussing. My brother Sosion brought up a matter, and when you mentioned Mutula Kilonzo, I almost did this. Because maximum respect. A minister that understood what he was supposed to do. A minister who showed what you'd call leadership. Because that is what we are missing. Why? Because first he took time to understand what was ailing the sector. And then he deployed his own intellect as a lawyer and all that. He did actually invest into it. Sion will tell you, he actually asked, let me go and look at this, where are we bogged down? He literally inputted into how do we draft the basic education law. And so you remember I was talking about the element of not just knowing, but owning that which you know. So that you do not start giving an excuse. It's like, it is the ministry that wants us to do. Because that one you dissociate yourself. So I would suggest, and I would be thinking, that when we have people in leadership, particularly the technical and policy leadership at the Ministry of Education, here is where we are dealing with millions and millions of young ones and even the adults. Because the issue of even look at what is happening at the higher education level, we should be having people with some semblance of clear conscience that when they are engaging in the process, first they understand, but they also have got the temerity to reach out to other stakeholders, the same way that Ambassador Amina attempted to do. And I realize that at some point, maybe within the Ministry of Education, you expect compliant fellas, because whenever they try to generate space or create space to generate consensus on certain issues, such people are not considered to be suitable for those positions. I'm saying so because I think
they are removed by cartels.
I'm saying, you say, yeah, those cartels that exist. So the cartel culture, which actually runs through in almost all sectors. Those cartels, how do we dismantle them? I'll be asking. Let me allow me to ask. Briefly. I think the cartel culture means state capture and all that. The Kenya Kwanza administration promised Kenyans that there will be an investigation on state capture. I'm looking forward to seeing that report. Why we are saying that is because when the leadership gets compromised or the objective and robust ones are blocked and actually elbowed out, we as a country should be worried. And I think that is where we should take this, this fight to.
Fair enough. We are running out of time, but before we give you a chance to give us your final submissions, because I still have issues in regards to funding, I want us to sample a few of your feedback here on K24. The hashtag is New Dawn, and Prudence Nicole says, what is required? What is required is adherence to the appropriate measures aimed at safeguarding the lives of pupils in those particular schools. If we can have the next one, Salim Abdul says, without primary boarding school, a good percentage of Kenyans would never have access to education. The war against boarding schools is a class war. Government can provide safer, better, and modern boarding schools for those who need such facilities. If we can have the next one, Dorcas Kerubo says, schools being boarding ain't wrong. The only thing that is a mess is the precautions put in place in case of emergency. If you can have one more, Moses Paul says, parents nowadays, or let me say for the past 10 years, awakaina watoto, looking for ways to stay away from their kids. Alafu mtoi akishamaliza shule akwame town. They have no bond. Mzazi analia tu ati Kevo never comes home. Because of time, I just want us to, stop at that. But as you give your final submissions, Dr. Mbaka, I want to, engage you in regards to funding, because the Ministry of Education did receive, an increment in funding of up to around 28 billion from 628.6 billion in 2023-24 to around 656 billion in 24-25. Now, when we talk about, these equipment, safety equipments, fire extinguishers and all that, where do schools get funding to buy, these particular equipments, to have these particular equipments? And from where you sit as a member of the National Assembly Education Committee, do you think there is need for more funding to ensure that, schools as well, adhere to these safety, regulations? Kindly, briefly.
Yes, there are two ways in which a school gets funding. One is from parents, and two is from the ministry. The ministry gives them funding for infrastructure, and the ministry also pays teachers. And there are many ways in which the ministry supports a school. But more importantly, parents do pay. Now, the school has its own budget. I was a principal of a school myself, and we had a budget. We knew how much I was collecting from parents and how much the ministry was giving me. The ministry was giving tuition, books, and teachers, and money for laboratory. But they did not give us food, money for food. Food came from the parents. And so any school that is a boarding school knows where it has money to get to buy fire extinguishers.
Okay.
They will know. Okay. They will have done their budget.
Okay.
But what is unfortunate is that they never buy the fire extinguishers because they don't think it's necessary. They only realize it's necessary when an accident such as the fire in Fano comes up.
Okay.
That's when they realize, oh, we didn't buy this.
Okay.
So I think sensitization on what a boarding school needs is important. Schools start, boarding schools are initiated, but they don't know, or if they know, they don't want to care. Okay. But that's where supervision comes in. The Ministry of Quality Assurance Unit, do they visit these schools? How often do they visit a school? Okay. Yeah. So my take here is that a boarding school is still very good, because children need to be in boarding school, especially children who live under difficult circumstances at home.
Okay.
Boarding schools will help them.
Okay, fair enough.
Day schools can also be a tragic thing, because a child may leave school to go home only to find an accident along the way, or being abused along the way. Okay. So either way, a child's life is in danger. Okay. So we need to protect them.
Fair enough.
So boarding school still is okay,
fair
but
enough.
the Ministry of Education should do its best to ensure that boarding schools are properly run. Okay, fair enough. Mr. Oruku, 30 seconds, kindly, because time is not on our side.
The best interest of the child is for all of us, all the actors, to play their role. Okay. To play their role so that you do not wait for somebody to ask you. Okay. But you should also know what role you're supposed to play. And also the element of allowing just our children or our parents to have only the choice of private schools. I think that is a danger, because the government has a responsibility to deliver quality, inclusive public education at the state expense, because they collect taxes. I think that is very important for me.
Fair enough. Mr. Sosion, 30 seconds, and I'm timing you. The issue of 100% transition to high school. How does the government work around that in ensuring that even as they transition to high school, there's enough infrastructure?
It must then operate within regulations, and that is why, from this show, I'm urging the president, pursuant to the court ruling that has directed the minister to establish education and quality assurance and standards to ensure that the ministries comply.
Okay.
And the minister and all ministers in the past have had a luxury of choosing which law to implement and which one to violate. There is no choice as to that. The moment we have an SCAG in place, then the issue of enforcement of regulations and standards shall automatically fall in place.
Fair enough, Mr.
And
Sosia.
there is need to strengthen the audit system of the funding that goes to school.
Fair enough.
Strengthen the accountability through the quality assurance and standard. And lastly, it is time to think about deboarding our education system. It's a conversation
a very
we cannot
conversation
shy away
we'll have
from
next
and
time.
run away from.
We'll have a conversation surrounding that next time. Thank you very much, Mr. Oruku, for making time. Thank you very much, Dr. Mbaka, for making time.
Thank you.
Mr. Sosion, always a pleasure having you around.
Thank you.
Well, that was the new dawn for you here, the conversation surrounding the state of education in the country. But to you, Mr. President, we've had a lot of task forces being formed, committees, but recommendations are not fully implemented. It's time we swing into action if we are to avert such tragic incidences in the future. Question is, what is the government going to do in regards to ensuring the safety of students across all schools in the country? And will those who be found culpable be held accountable before the courts of law? That was all that we had for you this particular morning here on New Dawn. Thank you very much for making time. We'll be taking a brief breather, but Remy Majala will be coming to you in a moment. Don't go away. Do have a wonderful day. And like always, God bless.